Hey everyone, how's your day going? Whether it's been good or rough, you're not alone. So sit back, relax, and let's step into the world of mystery together. Stephanie stood at the gate of Aunt Asami's house, her small suitcase heavy with clothes and books. She glanced up at the old, weathered home, its overgrown trees casting long shadows that swallowed most of the sunlight. Even though it had been months since she last visited, Stephanie couldn't shake the strange feeling creeping up on her. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her nerves. "Stephanie, you're here." Aunt Asami's cheerful voice broke through the silence as she stepped out of the house, her face glowing with a warm smile. She pulled Stephanie into a tight hug, the familiar scent of her aunt's perfume bringing a small sense of comfort. "Come inside, sweetheart. I baked your favorite pastries." Stephanie followed her aunt inside, the sweet aroma of freshly baked goods filling the air. But as she stepped into the living room, something felt off. Out of the corner of her eye, she caught a glimpse of a shadow darting across the room, too fast to make out what it was. She blinked, trying to focus, but there was nothing there except the old couch and a dusty lamp. "Auntie, is there someone else here?" Stephanie asked, her voice trembling slightly. Aunt Asami turned to her, her smile unwavering. "No, dear, it's just you and me. You must be tired from the trip. Your mind's playing tricks on you." Stephanie nodded, trying to believe her aunt. She sat down at the table, picking at the pastry Aunt Asami had set out. But the uneasy feeling didn't go away. She kept glancing around as if someone or something was watching her. That night, as Stephanie was getting ready for bed, she saw the shadow again. This time, it was clearer. A tall figure stood silently at the end of the hallway. Stephanie froze, her heart pounding. She closed her eyes, hoping it was just her imagination. When she opened them again, the shadow was gone. The next morning, Aunt Asami left for work early, leaving Stephanie alone in the house. She sat at the dining table, trying to relax. But then she heard soft footsteps behind her. Stephanie turned around, and this time she saw him clearly, a tall, pale man with cold, piercing eyes. "Hello there," the man said, his voice low and gravelly. "I'm Mosu, your aunt's boyfriend." Stephanie felt a chill run down her spine. She nodded politely, forcing a smile. "Nice to meet you, Uncle Mosu." Mosu didn't say anything else. He just stood there, staring at her with an unreadable expression. Stephanie felt uncomfortable and quickly excused herself to her room. But as she stepped inside, she noticed something that made her heart race. On Mosu's work desk, there was a straw doll with strands of human hair woven into it. Stephanie couldn't tear her eyes away from the doll. She remembered the horror stories she'd heard about cursed dolls. She quickly snapped a photo with her phone and hurried out of the room. When Aunt Asami returned, Stephanie told her everything. But her aunt just laughed it off, saying Mosu was an artist and the dolls were just his creations. Stephanie wanted to believe her, but deep down she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. That night, Stephanie couldn't sleep. She heard soft footsteps in the hallway again. She peeked out the door and saw Mosu standing there, holding another doll. He stared directly at her, then slowly drove a nail into the doll's heart. Stephanie screamed, slammed the door shut, and locked herself in her room. She tried calling her parents, but no one answered. All she could do was sit there, trembling, waiting for Aunt Asami to come home. The next morning, Mosu was gone. But on his desk, Stephanie saw 3 dolls, one with her face, one with her mother's, and one with Aunt Asami's. On the doll with her face, a nail was driven deep into its heart. Stephanie knew then that the real horror had only just begun. Stephanie couldn't shake the nightmares about the cursed dolls. She decided to leave Aunt Asami's house earlier than planned, using her upcoming exams as an excuse. Aunt Asami didn't ask too many questions, just hugged her tightly and told her to be safe. But before leaving, Stephanie couldn't help but glance back at Mosu's study. The 3 dolls were still there, silent and menacing. On the bus ride home, Stephanie sat alone, her mind still haunted by the terrifying images. She closed her eyes, trying to push away the unease. But then a familiar voice called out to her. "Stephanie? Is that you?" She opened her eyes and saw CRA-sensei, her literature teacher, leading a group of students on a field trip. Stephanie nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, it's me. I'm heading home." CRA-sensei sat down next to her, his kind eyes filled with concern. "You look exhausted. Everything okay?" Stephanie hesitated but decided to share a bit of her story. She didn't mention Mosu or the dolls, but she talked about the unease and fear she'd been feeling. CRA-sensei listened intently, then sighed. "You know, sometimes horror stories aren't just legends. They can hold terrifying truths we can't explain. Stephanie looked at him, curious. What do you mean? CRA-sensei smiled, but there was something unsettling about it. I've heard a story about a creature called Gu. It has the head of a cow and the body of a man. Anyone who hears its story is said to suffer terrible misfortune. Stephanie felt a chill. Have you ever told that story? CRA-sensei nodded, his gaze distant. Once. And it's the one time I never want to repeat. Stephanie wanted to ask more, but she could tell CRA-sensei didn't want to talk about it anymore. He stood up and rejoined his students. Stephanie sat there, her mind racing with unanswered questions. When the bus stopped at a rest area, Stephanie got off to get some fresh air. She saw CRA-sensei standing alone, staring off into the distance. She was about to approach him when she heard a whisper behind her. Don't go near him. Stephanie turned and saw a student named Yui, her face pale with fear. What's wrong? Stephanie asked. Yui shook her head, her voice trembling. He's not himself anymore. When he told the story of Gu, something took over him. I saw it, his eyes turned black. He's not human anymore. Stephanie felt a cold sweat break out. She looked back at CRA-sensei and noticed something was off. His eyes were empty, as if his soul had been drained. When the bus continued its journey, Stephanie sat down, trying not to look at CRA-sensei. But then she heard a whisper from behind her seat. Stephanie, do you want to hear the story of Gu? She turned and saw CRA-sensei standing there, his eyes completely black. Stephanie shook her head, trying to stay calm. No. I'm good. But CRA-sensei didn't stop. His voice was cold and haunting. There was a small, abandoned village where archaeologists found a strange skeleton. A cow's head, a man's body. They called it Gu. Stephanie closed her eyes, trying to block out his voice. But it echoed in her mind like a curse she couldn't escape. When the bus arrived at its destination, Stephanie hurried off, desperate to get away from CRA-sensei. But as she looked back, she realized the story of Gu wasn't just a story anymore. It had become a part of her, and she knew she'd never be free of it. Stephanie returned home, but the nightmares didn't stop. The cursed dolls, the story of Gu, they haunted her every thought. She tried to focus on her studies, but the image of CRA-sensei's black eyes and the chilling tale of Gu kept creeping back into her mind. A week later, Stephanie got a message from Yodo, a friend she'd met during the field trip. He invited her over for a weekend hangout with a group of friends. Stephanie hesitated but decided to go, hoping some time with friends would help her forget the horrors. When Stephanie arrived at Yodo's house, she was greeted by a warm, lively atmosphere. The group had pizza and a lineup of horror movies ready. But as the night went on, one of the friends, a girl named Aiko, suggested they play a game to spice things up. Let's play Hit Ori Kakurembo, Aiko said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Yodo immediately shook his head. No, don't mess with that. It's dangerous. But Aiko and the others didn't listen. They gathered the supplies, an old stuffed bear, some rice, scissors, and red string. Stephanie felt uneasy but didn't want to ruin the mood. She sat back and watched as they began the game. Aiko cut open the bear's stomach, stuffed it with rice, and pricked her finger to add a drop of blood. The others followed, each adding their blood to the rice inside the bear. Yodo sat quietly, his face pale. We shouldn't be doing this, Yodo whispered to Stephanie. This isn't just a game. It can summon things that shouldn't be summoned. Stephanie nodded, but it was too late. The game began. Aiko and the others hid the bear in the bathroom, turned off the lights, and started counting. Stephanie sat there, her heart pounding, the unease growing stronger. When Aiko and the others found the bear, they shouted, "Found you." But then the bathroom light flickered and went out. A cold, eerie laugh echoed through the room and the bear disappeared. Stephanie felt a chill run down her spine. She looked around, but the bear was gone. Yodo stood up, his face filled with terror. We need to stop this now. But it was too late. A giggle came from behind the bathroom door and the door slowly creaked open. The bear reappeared, but it wasn't a stuffed animal anymore. Its eyes glowed red and its mouth twisted into a sinister grin. Aiko screamed and the group scattered. Stephanie and Yodo ran to the living room, but the bear followed. Yodo grabbed a bottle of salt water and sprayed it, but it had no effect. We have to burn it, Yodo shouted. Stephanie grabbed a lighter, but before she could light it, the bear lunged at her, biting her hand. She screamed in pain, and Yodo shoved the bear away, lighting it on fire. The bear burst into flames, a cold, piercing screech filling the air before everything fell silent. Stephanie sat down, breathing heavily, clutching her injured hand. Yodo hugged her, his face filled with worry. What have we done? Stephanie whispered. Yodo shook his head. The game of Hit Ori Kakurembo never ends. Once it starts, it will keep haunting us. Stephanie looked at Yodo, the unease growing stronger. She knew the horrors she'd experienced weren't just stories. They were curses, and she didn't know how to escape them. Stephanie and Yodo tried to return to their normal lives, but they both knew the horrors weren't over. Stephanie still woke up in the middle of the night, feeling like someone was watching her. Yodo carried a bottle of salt water and a candle everywhere, ready for whatever might come. One afternoon, Stephanie got a call from Aunt Asami. Her voice was shaky, filled with fear. "Stephanie, can you come home? Something's wrong." Stephanie didn't hesitate. She took the next bus back to Aunt Asami's house. When she arrived, the house looked different. The windows were shut, the curtains drawn, and a cold, eerie atmosphere filled the air. Aunt Asami stood at the door, her face pale. "Come inside, but be careful," she said, her voice trembling. Stephanie stepped inside and immediately noticed something was off. On Mosa's desk, the 3 dolls were still there, but they weren't straw dolls anymore. They were made of cloth with crude stitching and faces that looked exactly like Stephanie, Aunt Asami, and Mosu. "Auntie, what's going on?" Stephanie asked, her voice shaking. Aunt Asami shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know. Mosa disappeared, but these dolls, they keep appearing. And every time they do, I feel like someone's watching me." Stephanie looked at the dolls, and this time she noticed something that made her blood run cold. On the doll with Mosa's face, a nail was driven deep into its heart, but not from the outside. The nail was pushed from the inside, as if the doll had done it itself. "We have to burn them," Stephanie said, her voice firm. Aunt Asami nodded, and together they took the dolls to the backyard. Stephanie grabbed a lighter, but before she could light it, a cold laugh came from behind her. She turned and saw Mosa standing there, his eyes pitch black, a sinister smile on his face. "Hello, Stephanie," Mosa said, his voice cold. "Did you really think you could escape me?" Stephanie felt a chill run down her spine, but she didn't run. She looked him in the eye, her voice steady. "You can't hurt us." Mosa laughed, and at that moment, the dolls burst into flames. The fire spread quickly, engulfing Mosu, but he didn't scream. He just stood there, laughing, until the flames consumed him completely. When the fire died down, Mosu was gone. But on the ground, Stephanie saw a small nail driven deep into the earth. She picked it up and realized it was the same nail that had been in the doll. Aunt Asami hugged Stephanie, tears streaming down her face. "We did it, sweetheart." But Stephanie wasn't so sure. She looked at the nail in her hand, the unease still lingering. She knew the curse wasn't over. Mosa might be gone, but the dolls, the story of Gu, and the game of Hit Ori Kakarembo were still out there, waiting to haunt her again. Stephanie and Aunt Asami went back inside, hoping it was finally over. But as Stephanie entered her room, she saw a small doll lying on her bed. This doll wasn't like the others. It had her face, and in its heart, a nail was driven deep. Stephanie stared at the doll, the unease growing stronger. She knew the curse wasn't over, and she didn't know if she'd ever escape it.